dimly lit room, filled with the soft ticking of a clock. The walls are adorned with bookshelves, degrees, and framed photos of Dr. Daniel Hayes. Mid-40s? Well-dressed, intelligent but slightly weary. Across from him sits Ethan Carter, 30s, disheveled, eyes sunken with paranoia. His fingers twitch against the wooden armrest of his chair. Daniel leans forward, notepad in hand, voice calm but analytical. "Daniel, Mr. Carter, you've been here before. You told me you had a breakthrough, that you understood your fears were just fears." Ethan laughs softly, shaking his head. "Ethan, you still don't see it, do you?" Daniel, "See what?" Ethan leans in, whispering. "Ethan, the cracks. Tick, tick, tick." The clock on the wall suddenly seems louder. Daniel glances up at it. The second hand is stuck, twitching at the same spot. His eyes narrow. He looks back at Ethan, who is staring at him, a knowing smile creeping onto his lips. "Ethan, once you see them, they start seeing you." The room is silent, except for the steady ticking of the clock. Daniel rubs his temples, staring at his notes on Ethan Carter. Scribbled phrases stand out. Reality shifts. People change overnight. Once you see the cracks, they start seeing you. He exhales, shaking his head, and closes the file. He glances at the clock again. The second hand, which was stuck before, is now ticking normally. Daniel, muttering, "I need sleep." He stands up, grabs his coat, and moves toward the door. The hallway is dimly lit, eerily quiet. Daniel walks toward the elevator. As he presses the button, his reflection in the polished doors lags slightly behind. Daniel blinks. His reflection catches up. He frowns, looks around. No one is there. The elevator dings. The doors slide open. He steps inside. As the doors close, he catches a glimpse of someone standing at the end of the hallway. A shadowy figure, unmoving, watching. Before he can react, ding. The elevator jerks downward, lights flickering. Daniel grips the rail, heart pounding. The lights stabilize. The doors open. Daniel steps out, looking uneasy. The garage is empty, silent, his car the only one parked. As he reaches for his keys, something catches his eye. The license plate on his car is wrong. "Daniel," softly. "What the hell?" He looks around, suddenly aware of how quiet it is. The fluorescent lights flicker overhead. Behind him, a soft scuffling sound. Daniel turns, nothing. He shakes his head, exhales sharply, and unlocks the car. As he opens the door, he catches a reflection in the rearview mirror, Ethan Carter, sitting in the back seat. Daniel whips around. The back seat is empty. A long, tense silence. Daniel, breathing heavily, slides into the driver's seat. He shuts the door, gripping the wheel tightly. After a moment, he mutters to himself, "Daniel, you're just tired." The camera lingers on the rearview mirror, where a faint smudge of a handprint is still visible on the glass. Daniel lies in bed, staring at the ceiling. His wife, Sophie, late 30s, warm but distant tonight, sleeps beside him. The room is dark except for the faint glow of the digital clock on the nightstand. 3:33 a.m. A soft creaking sound. Daniel blinks, sitting up slightly. The closet door is open a crack. Daniel, whispering to himself, "Did I leave that open?" He looks over at Sophie. She's turned away, sleeping soundly. The creaking continues, a slow, rhythmic sound. Daniel swings his legs over the side of the bed, hesitant. He stares at the slight opening of the closet. The darkness inside seems too deep. With a shaky breath, he stands up and walks toward it. The creaking stops, a beat of silence. He reaches out, hesitating for just a moment, then yanks the door open. Nothing, just clothes hanging lifelessly. Daniel exhales in relief, but as he turns back toward the bed, Sophie is sitting up, staring at him. Her face is in complete shadow. "Sophie," softly, "who are you talking to?" Daniel freezes. "Daniel, I wasn't talking." A long pause. "Sophie, yes, you were." She tilts her head slightly. "Sophie, you were whispering." Daniel stares at her, pulse pounding. She leans forward, her face still obscured by darkness. Sophie whispering, "Was it Ethan?" Daniel takes a step back. "Daniel, go back to sleep, Sophie." Silence. She doesn't move. Then, in one sudden motion, she lies back down, turning away from him, as if nothing happened. Daniel just stands there, breath shaky. He looks back at the digital clock, 3:33 a.m. Still, unmoving. The numbers flicker subtly, almost like they are struggling to exist. Then a soft whisper. "Ethan OS, you see the cracks now, don't you?" Daniel sits at his desk, visibly exhausted. He stares at a stack of patient files, his fingers drumming against the desk. His office feels off. The books on the shelf seem out of order. The framed degrees on the wall are slightly tilted. He looks at his nameplate, Dr. Daniel Hayes. Tense moment. His gaze moves to his notepad, scribbled at the bottom, in his own handwriting, "Who is Ethan Carter?" Daniel frowns. He doesn't remember writing that. A knock at the door. He looks up as his secretary, Martha, 50s, motherly but professional, steps in. "Martha, Dr. Carter?" Daniel freezes. "Daniel, what did you just say?" Martha looks at him, confused. "Martha, Dr. Carter? Your 2 o'clock is here." His stomach tightens. "Daniel, Martha. My name is Dr. Hayes." A beat. Martha's expression flickers, briefly, into something unreadable. Then, she smiles politely. "Martha, of course. My mistake." She steps aside as the patient enters. It's Ethan Carter, looking calm, almost amused. Daniel stares, frozen. Ethan sits down, crossing his legs. "Ethan, rough night. Doc?" Daniel clenches his jaw. "Daniel, why are you here?" Ethan leans forward, eyes glinting. "Ethan, you called me." A tense silence. Daniel glances at his phone. The call log shows. Outgoing call, Ethan Carter, 3:33 a.m. His breath catches. He doesn't remember making that call. Ethan watches him carefully. "Ethan, softly. You're starting to wake up." Daniel stands abruptly, knocking over his coffee. "Daniel, this isn't real." Ethan just smiles. "Ethan, that's what I used to say, too." A long, chilling beat. Then, Ethan reaches into his pocket and slides a folder across the desk. Daniel hesitates before picking it up. He flips it open. Inside is a case file. Handwritten notes, session logs, his own handwriting. But the name on the folder isn't Ethan Carter. It says Daniel Hayes. The room warps slightly. The walls seem to breathe. The clock on the wall ticks backward. Daniel's grip tightens on the folder. His pulse pounds. Daniel whispering, "No." Ethan leans in, voice gentle but terrifying. "Ethan, you were never the doctor." A long, agonizing silence. Daniel slowly looks down at his own hands. For a split second, his fingers look restrained in white medical straps. A glimpse of a padded room. Then it's gone. The office is normal again. Daniel is shaking. Ethan stands up, straightens his jacket, and moves toward the door. Before leaving, he pauses, looking over his shoulder. "Ethan, see you at our next session." And then he's gone. Daniel stares down at the folder. His own case file, his own handwriting, his own name. Daniel is still at his desk, gripping the case file labeled with his own name. His hands are trembling. He flips through the pages. Session notes, diagnoses, all describing him. Daniel, reading aloud, voice shaking. Patient exhibits severe delusions, believing himself to be his own therapist. His breath catches. His own handwriting continues. Repeatedly denies being Ethan Carter. Daniel slams the file shut. His office phone rings. A harsh, piercing sound. He stares at it. The caller ID reads, Ethan Carter. His chest tightens. He lets it ring. A few moments later, his cell phone vibrates. Unknown caller. Daniel swallows hard and answers. Daniel whispering, "Who is this?" A pause. Then Ethan's voice, but it's distorted, like a recording being played too slow. "Ethan, you. Already?" "No." Daniel throws the phone down, his breathing ragged. The office lights flicker. The walls subtly shift, like the room is breathing. And hallway, Continuous Daniel stumbles into the hallway, rubbing his temples. He sees Martha at her desk. She looks wrong. Her hair is slightly different. The picture frame on her desk, which always held a photo of her dog, now shows a completely different animal. Daniel's hands tremble. Daniel, Martha. She looks up, smiling. Martha, Dr. Carter. His stomach drops. He shakes his head. Daniel, no.
I'm Dr. Hayes.
Tense pause. Martha tilts her head slightly. Martha, that's not what your file says. His heart pounds. Daniel, my file? What file? Martha calmly pulls open a drawer and hands him a thick patient file. On the front, Ethan Carter, case number 1021, patient. Ethan Carter, diagnosis: severe identity delusion, physician Dr. Benjamin Wallace. Daniel staggers backward. Daniel, no, this isn't right. He flips open the case file. Inside are photographs, photos of himself, but in each one he is sitting in a padded cell, wearing a hospital gown, and standing beside him, Dr. Benjamin Wallace, a man he doesn't recognize. Suddenly, a loud scream echoes down the hallway. Daniel spins toward the sound. The hallway seems longer than before, the walls stretching, warping. At the far end, a door appears. A metal asylum door, marked Ward 6, Patient 1021. The screaming intensifies. Daniel backs away, panicked. He turns to Martha, but her face is blank, empty, just smooth skin where her features should be. Daniel gasps, stumbling backward. Suddenly, two hands grab his shoulders from behind. He spins around. Ethan is standing right in front of him, calm, smiling. Ethan, it's time to wake up, doctor. The world distorts. The walls seem to crumble into white nothingness. Daniel's screams echo as everything shatters around him. A harsh fluorescent light flickers. The steady beep of a heart monitor hums softly. Daniel's eyes flutter open. He is lying on a hospital bed, wearing a white patient gown. His wrists are loosely strapped to the bed. The room is small, empty. The walls are covered in thick padding. Daniel blinks rapidly, breathing shallow and panicked. A mirror is mounted on the far wall. A one-way observation window. Beyond the glass, shadowy figures move, watching. Daniel whispering, no. His heart pounds. He yanks at the restraints. Suddenly, the door clicks. A tall man in a doctor's coat steps in. Dr. Benjamin Wallace, mid-50s, calm, coldly professional. He carries a clipboard. Dr. Wallace, good morning, Ethan. Daniel's body stiffens. Daniel, I'm not. Dr. Wallace, gently, shoo. You always say that. Daniel's breathing quickens. Dr. Wallace moves closer, flipping through the clipboard. Dr. Wallace, how are we feeling today? The sedatives wore off faster than expected. Daniel shakes his head violently. Daniel, this isn't real. I have an office. My name is Dr. Daniel Hayes. Dr. Wallace nods slowly, unfazed. Dr. Wallace, and yesterday you were Daniel Hayes. He flips a page. Dr. Wallace, last week you were a private investigator named Carter Reynolds. He flips another page. Dr. Wallace, a month ago, you believed you were a school teacher named Adam Blake. Daniel stares, horrified. His hands tremble. He looks down at himself, scars line his arms. Old self-inflicted scratches, like someone desperately trying to peel away their own skin. Dr. Wallace gently places a mirror in front of him. Daniel stares at his own reflection. His breath catches, because staring back at him is Ethan Carter, a broken man, sunken eyes, a pale face full of madness and exhaustion. Daniel shakes his head violently. Daniel, desperate. No, that's not me. He closes his eyes, squeezing them shut. Daniel, whispering to himself, I'm Daniel Hayes. I'm Daniel Hayes. Dr. Wallace watches silently. Dr. Wallace, you can keep telling yourself that, but the truth always wins in the end. A long silence. Daniel slowly opens his eyes. The mirror is gone. The room is different now. A hospital bed, medical equipment, patient ID bracelet on his wrist. He reads the name, Ethan Carter. His body locks up. His breath stops. Dr. Wallace places a hand on his shoulder. Dr. Wallace, welcome back. Daniel's screams rip through the room. Daniel, or Ethan, sits in a cold sweat, gripping the sheets of his hospital bed. His breath is shaky, uneven. The walls around him feel closer, tighter. The room's fluorescent light flickers, casting unnatural shadows that seem to move on their own. A soft click. The door unlocks. Daniel freezes. He turns his head, slowly, cautiously. The door is slightly ajar. Beyond it, the hallway is dimly lit. Empty. A moment of hesitation. Then he moves. He slides out of bed, bare feet hitting the cold floor. He tiptoes toward the door, every nerve on edge. He peeks into the hallway, no guards.
No nurses.
Just silence. His pulse pounds. He steps out. In psychiatric hospital, hallway. Continuous, the hallway is longer than it should be. Doors line both sides, each with a small, fogged-up observation window. Soft murmurs, whispers echo from behind the doors. Gibberish. Daniel moves carefully, pressing against the wall. He passes one of the doors. Inside, a shadow moves unnaturally. A soft giggle. He doesn't look back. At the far end of the hall, a green exit sign flickers. He quickens his pace. His breathing sharpens. The hallway feels endless. He glances at the walls. The framed hospital portraits seem wrong, distorted. A photo of Dr. Wallace, except his eyes are hollow, black pits. A photo of the hospital staff, except all their faces are stretched into unnatural grins. Daniel's breath shudders. He keeps moving. A soft humming stops him in his tracks. A woman's voice.
Familiar.
He turns his head. Down the hallway, a figure stands in the shadows. His wife, but her face is obscured by darkness. She takes a slow step forward. Daniel, whispering, "Anna?" She stops. The humming distorts, slows. Her head tilts unnaturally. Suddenly, she lunges forward with impossible speed. Daniel stumbles backward, heart slamming in his chest. But she's gone. The hallway is empty again. His breath shakes. He turns back toward the exit sign. And the hallway is shorter now. The exit door is right in front of him. His stomach twists. Something is wrong. But he reaches for the handle anyway. His hand touches the metal. Then a loud alarm blares. The door won't budge. The hallway warps. The lights flicker violently. From behind him, a voice. Dr. Wallace's voice. "Dr. Wallace, OS, you can't escape the truth. Ethan." Daniel spins around DR. Wallace is right there, standing inches away. And behind him, a dozen figures in white hospital gowns. Featureless faces. Watching. Daniel chokes on a scream. Dr. Wallace raises a syringe. "Dr. Wallace, time for your medication." Daniel bolts toward the door, slamming his fists against it. "Daniel, let me out." The walls start to melt. The exit sign fades away. The door disappears. Dr. Wallace leans in. "Dr. Wallace, you were never going anywhere." Daniel lets out a final broken scream, and then a sharp stab of the needle. Darkness swallows him. A steady beeping. The soft hum of a ventilation system. Daniel's eyes flutter open. He's lying in bed. Again, the restraints on his wrists are gone. His hospital gown is clean, fresh, like he was never restrained at all. The room is different. The padded walls are gone. Instead, it looks like a normal hospital patient room, small but not ominous. A window lets in daylight. For a moment, everything feels almost normal. But then Daniel blinks and notices the calendar on the wall. It reads, October 27th, 2015. His stomach drops. That was 10 years ago. His hands shake as he slowly sits up. The door to the room opens. A nurse, Martha, walks in holding a clipboard. She smiles. "Martha, good morning, Dr. Hayes." Daniel freezes. Daniel whispering, "What?" Martha calmly checks his foredrip, adjusting the line. "Martha, you gave us quite a scare. You've been unconscious for a few days." Daniel's heartbeat pounds in his ears. He looks down. He's in clean white sheets. His reflection in the window looks like himself.
No scars.
no madness in his eyes. He looks back at Martha. "Daniel, where am I?" Martha gives him a patient, practiced smile. Wallace walks in, carrying a manila file. Daniel tenses instantly, but Wallace just gives him a warm smile. "Dr. Wallace, you're awake." Daniel stares at him. Wallace moves to the chair beside the bed, flipping through the file. "Dr. Wallace, you've been under a lot of stress." "Daniel, working too hard. You collapsed at the office. We brought you here for observation." Daniel's jaw clenches. He looks back at the window, at his reflection. He looks normal. He looks at his ID bracelet. Says, "Dr. Daniel Hayes, not Ethan Carter." Daniel swallows hard. "Daniel, I don't remember collapsing." "Dr. Wallace, that's normal. Trauma can affect memory, but with a little rest, you'll be back to work soon." Daniel stares at him, a small piece of paper sticking out of the file Wallace left behind. Daniel waits until the door clicks shut. Then he grabs the file with trembling hands. He pulls the paper free. It's an old hospital intake form. The name at the top, patient, Ethan Carter. Daniel's breath stops. His head pounds. He flips the page and finds a photograph. A grainy, black and white image of a man in a hospital gown, sitting in a padded room. A man who looks exactly like him. Daniel's body locks up. His mind spins. His vision darkens. And then, a clock on the wall ticks softly. The room is silent, bathed in dim, blue-tinted moonlight filtering through the window. Daniel sits on the edge of the bed, the old hospital intake form clenched in his shaking hands. His heart pounds. He looks at the photograph of Ethan Carter, a man who looks exactly like him. His fingers tighten around the paper. Daniel, whispering to himself, "This doesn't make sense." He looks toward the door. The hospital feels off. It's too quiet, too still. He stands up slowly, testing his legs. They feel weak, sluggish. He takes a few shaky steps toward the window. Looking outside, the cityscape beyond the hospital looks wrong. The lights flicker unnaturally. Buildings appear warped, shifting when he looks away. His stomach twists. A low static hum begins in the air. Suddenly, a faint knock at his door. Daniel's breath catches. He turns. Another knock. Slow, methodical. He cautiously steps forward and presses his ear to the door. Silence. Then a whisper. Whispered voice says, "Dr. Hayes, they're lying to you." Daniel's blood turns ice cold. His breathing shudders. He quickly unlocks the door and pulls it open. But the hallway is empty. No one is there. A faint flicker of movement catches his eye down the corridor. A figure in a hospital gown disappears around a corner. Daniel hesitates. Then he steps into the hallway. The corridor is dimly lit, bathed in flickering overhead light. Daniel moves cautiously, his bare feet silent on the tile floor. The hallway seems longer than before. He follows the direction of the figure. His breath sharpens as he approaches a door at the end of the hall. A sign above it reads, "Archive Room." Something about it feels important. He tests the doorknob. It's unlocked. A hesitation, then he slips inside. Int. Archive Room. Night. The room is cold, stale. Metal filing cabinets line the walls, their labels faded with age. A single desk lamp flickers, casting deep shadows. Daniel scans the room, his eyes landing on a drawer labeled Patient Records 2015. His heart pounds. He pulls it open. Inside, hundreds of old case files. He flips through them, hands shaking. Then he finds it. A file labeled Carter, Ethan. Daniel slowly pulls it out. He opens it and his breath stops. Inside, dozens of pages, all filled with his own handwriting. Session notes. Psychological assessments. Dr. Wallace's silhouette looms larger. "Dr. Wallace, OS, come now. Let's not make this difficult." The doorknob rattles. Daniel's breathing spikes. His eyes land on a mirror, standing tall in the corner of the archive room. The only mirror in the entire hospital. His own reflection stares back at him. But something is off. The reflection is smiling. Twisted, knowing grin. Daniel whispering, "Break the mirror." Dr. Wallace begins unlocking the door. Daniel lunges toward the mirror. His fist clenches. Dr. Wallace throws open the door. Daniel swings his fist forward, shattering the mirror into 1,000 jagged shards. A deafening scream rips through the air. The room warps, distorts. The world starts to collapse. Daniel feels himself being pulled into darkness. Then everything blinks out. A sharp gasp. Daniel jerks awake. His lungs burn. His head pounds. For a moment, he sees only darkness. Then light floods in. He's lying in a bed. Not a hospital bed. A normal bed. His fingers grip soft sheets. The faint scent of coffee and paper lingers in the air. His breathing slows. The room around him is familiar. A warm glow from a bedside lamp. Stacks of books on the nightstand. A framed photo of him and his wife. His office, or his bedroom. Daniel sits up slowly. He looks down. He's wearing a t-shirt and pajama pants. No hospital gown. No restraints. His heart races. Is it over? His eyes flick to the mirror across the room. He sees himself. Not smiling. Not distorted. Just him. A deep exhale. Daniel whispering, "It was just a dream." He swings his legs over the bed and stands, testing the floor beneath him. Solid. Real. Then, a soft voice behind him. "Woman, OS. Daniel?" Daniel freezes. He turns. His wife, Claire, stands in the doorway. She's wearing her usual nightgown, her hair tousled from sleep. She looks normal. Real. "Claire, you okay?" Daniel blinks. His mouth is dry. Daniel, yeah, just a nightmare. Claire smiles softly. "Claire, come back to bed." Daniel nods slowly. She turns and disappears into the hallway. Daniel runs a hand through his hair. Everything feels right. Maybe it really was just a dream. Maybe he really was just stressed. He exhales, moves toward the bathroom. Daniel flicks on the light. A warm, yellow glow. He steps to the sink, gripping the edges tightly. His reflection stares back at him. Normal.
No lags. No smiles.
Just him. His chest rises and falls. Then he turns on the faucet. The water runs clear, cool against his fingers. Daniel exhales a shaky breath. He splashes water on his face, rubbing his eyes. Then, a sound behind him, a soft rustle, like someone is standing there. His spine stiffens. Slowly, he looks up, into the mirror. Claire is standing behind him. Her face is calm, but her eyes are wrong. Too dark, too empty. Daniel's breath catches. Then she speaks. Claire softly, "You didn't wake up, Daniel." Daniel goes rigid. His pulse hammers. His hands tremble. He turns around, but there's no one there. The hallway is empty. His blood runs cold. He turns back to the mirror. Claire's reflection is still there, still staring at him, still smiling. And this time, so is his. A slow, unnatural grin spreads across his own reflection. Daniel stumbles backward. The mirror distorts. A deep, warping whisper fills the room. Whispered voice, "You never wake up." The lights flicker violently. Daniel clutches his head, gasping. The mirror cracks. Darkness pours from the fracture, swallowing the room whole. A deafening scream, then a sharp inhale. Daniel jerks awake. He's sitting upright in his chair, a pen in his hand. His office is exactly as it was before, books neatly stacked, the soft hum of a clock, his nameplate gleaming on the desk. Dr. Daniel Hayes. He breathes heavily, sweat beading on his forehead. His hands grip the desk. His knuckles turn white. Was it all just a dream? He looks down. Patient file sits in front of him, neatly placed. His heart stops. The name on the file? Ethan Carter. Daniel stares. His fingers hesitate. Then, trembling, he opens the file. Inside, it's empty. Just blank pages. Faint knock at the door. Daniel's breath catches. He slowly looks up. The door creaks open and Ethan Carter steps inside. But something is wrong. He looks exactly like Daniel. Same face, same posture, same eyes. Daniel feels the air vanish from his lungs. Ethan, or is it Daniel? Smiles. Ethan softly, Dr. Hayes? Or should I say Ethan? Daniel shakes his head. Daniel whispering, no, I'm not. Ethan tilts his head, grinning. Ethan, you've done this before, haven't you? Daniel stiffens. The room darkens. The clock stops ticking. Ethan steps closer. Ethan whispering, how many times have we done this? Daniel backs away. His mind is spinning. Ethan sits down in the chair across from him. Calm, patient. His fingers drum against the desk. Ethan, the real question is, do you want to wake up? The lights flicker violently. Daniel clenches his fists. His voice is hoarse, barely above a whisper. Daniel, what are you? Ethan leans forward, smiling. Ethan softly, I'm you. I'm the patient. I'm the doctor. I'm the dream. I'm the nightmare. And you? His smile widens. Ethan, you're trapped. The walls bend, distort. The room begins to collapse into itself. Daniel clutches his head, screaming. A blinding flash, then INT. Psychiatric hospital, patient room. Night. Daniel wakes up. Again. His chest rises and falls rapidly. He looks around. White walls. Soft ticking of a clock. The room is small, cold. The nameplate on the wall reads, Patient, Ethan Carter. His hands tremble. A voice crackles over the intercom. Intercom voice, good morning, Ethan. Time for your session with Dr. Hayes. Daniel's blood runs cold. His reflection in the window glass, he sees himself. But this time, his reflection is wearing a doctor's coat. The cycle has reset.